House, and I look forward to more from the B team on the other side. Thank you.
The next call is a split call. Order. The next call is a split call. Labour and the Greens. Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, if that was Todd McClay's audition for Cabinet, I wouldn't be making an appointment to see the Governor-General just yet. In fact, Todd McClay talked about the 2005 election. Well, that's kind of ironic because at the 2005 election, I seem to recall the current leader of the National Party going up and down the country promising to fight interest-free student loans with every bone in his body. Well, since when has John Key become he must have become a bit of a jellyfish these days, because the interest-free student loans are still here after 3 years of a national government. We don't know for how much longer they're going to be here, of course, because we know Stephen Joyce doesn't like them, and at every opportunity that he gets, Stephen Joyce takes a pot shot in interest-free student loans, and the real question is who's going to win out in the end of that? Will it be Stephen Joyce or will it be John Key? Because I suspect Stephen Joyce is going to be around a little bit longer than John Key is, so I suspect that Stephen Joyce might just get there by attrition. But of course, the question is when John Key goes, because if he goes before the next election, which is very possible, then Stephen Joyce might get his way. Of course, if John Key holds out to the next election, which he is bound to lose, then Stephen Joyce won't get his way, because of course there'll be a Labour government and interest-free student loans will be here to stay. But if we come to this, Maurice Williamson, we know Maurice Williamson doesn't like interest-free student loans. He was another one who railed against it when the Labour government introduced it, and yet now he's sitting there supporting interest-free student loans. Maurice Williamson, of course, one of the national ministers that we can always rely on to say what he actually thinks, rather than what he's told to say. So I wouldn't be, if I was Maurice Williamson, I wouldn't be making an appointment to see the Governor-General for a position in Cabinet either. He's been. No, I really wouldn't. But look, moving to the substance of the bill and to the issue of the repayment holidays, which the current government decreasing from 3 years to 1. I thought it was interesting to go back and look at why it was increased in the first place from 1 year to 3, which of course was only done back in 2005. And it was only done back in 2005, and in fact there are some very, I think, pragmatic words offered to explain that at the time, back in 2007, March 27th, 2007, during the committee stages of the debate, when a member of the House who was arguing in favour of it said, and I think this is really good, so I'm going to quote for it, I know other members have quoted from it as well. It reads, "The reality they all faced was a very massive debt upon their return to New Zealand, which in some cases would be enough for them to make the decision not to come home at all, and our country would be the loser." I agree with that sentiment. I think if you do create these huge penalties, there's a risk that people will simply not come home in order to avoid them. But the quote goes on, "We need to take a pragmatic way through this, and being someone who places great virtue on pragmatism, it struck me that the logical course of action was to derive the solution that we have, to extend the holiday period for 3 years, recognising the fact that young New Zealanders take that extended period overseas." I thought those were very, very sage words of advice, common sense, in fact, from Mr Common Sense himself, Mr Peter Dunn. Unfortunately, Peter Dunn's pragmatism these days tends to go along the lines that the pragmatic approach is to vote for whatever the government, whomever the government are proposing, in order to pragmatically hold his ministerial warrant. That seems to be the Peter Dunn approach these days. That's right, that well-known pragmatic principle of supporting whatever is required in order to keep his ministerial job. I think Peter Dunn was right the first time. Peter Dunn was right the first time when he said the pragmatic thing to do was to extend the repayment holiday to 3 years. It's a shame, I assume, that he is going to vote in favour of this new pragmatic decision to reverse his earlier pragmatic decision, because if he's going to stick with his first pragmatic stance, then the government presumably won't have the numbers in order to pass this, because of course they need Peter Dunn's vote to pass this. So I'd invite Peter Dunn to in fact reverse his position and go back to the position that he held before, and we will be testing that in the committee stages of the House, I'm sure, to see which Peter Dunn will be coming out to play when this is debated in the committee stage of the House. Mr Mr. Speaker, the reason why this is important is all New Zealanders revel in the opportunity to go overseas at some point. Many people do that after they have studied, and I want to
Sorry
make
to
sure
interrupt the
they come
honourable
home
member.
again.
His time has expired. Call Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.